Hi. It's hard to believe this is our first week together, isn't it? Well, this week we are working with step 4, and I hope so far the preceding steps and the episodes that we've shared together have been able to open you up to new expanded possibilities of you and what you're capable of doing. Today is the searching and moral inventory of ourselves. I also call this step facing my demons. And the perceived fears that I've created within myself. And it's not always easy to do this. There are some things that has happened to a lot of us, including me, that may seem unforgivable. And how could I possibly have played a role in this? And that's not to discover right here and right now. That's just where we're working towards is our own self discovery and where we fit into the whole process. But in this step, this is the last time that you are going to be able to play the blame game. So get it all out while you can, because from this step forward, it's about personal responsibility and it's about holding yourself accountable. So we're going to move forward with this, and I hope I'm able to express it in a manner for you in which you can understand. Step 4 for me, when they asked about a searching and moral inventory of myself, I mean, how many of us have ever really done that? It's always been very easy to say, well, you made me feel like this and you did this to me, and that's why I feel and do what I do. And that's how we come to define ourselves, by the experiences of our past. And then when anybody comes into our field of awareness in the now, the reactions that we have held deep inside of us to those experiences of the past tend to explode out onto this new person or experience or circumstance that's in front of us, because we have never dealt with learning how to respond instead of reacting. And that's because we've never gone inside and examined them for what they really are. And some of them are just self-made delusions, and over time we have played it over and over and over and over in our heads. And as we have slowly but surely removed ourselves from the blame, or as little as possible, and more the blame rests upon the other person and what they did and we perceive them to do to us. And that's how we keep spinning these demons inside of us. We keep replaying it. We keep rehashing it. We keep reliving it. We keep going over and saying, I wished I'd have said this, or if I could have done this, or, we just replay different avenues of this, something that's already happened. It's already taken place. There is no changing it, yet we want to keep revisiting it in many different scenarios, and many different ways of removing ourselves from any possible involvement and in the truth of it all. Like I've always said, there's two sides to every story. There's your side, there's my side, and then there's the truth. And the part that is the actual truth of it all is the part that we need to learn to work towards. Um, because we can't keep living in the illusion that we've created for ourselves. And today we want to start learning how to free ourselves. Now, I'm not going to lie to you, this is a very difficult process. It was for me. I had to rehash a lot of feelings and a lot of anger, guilt and hurt and shame and fear that I had buried for a number of years. I mean, all of my life. My God, I used every drug known to man to try to subside and cover and mask all these feelings. I didn't want to feel. And that's what we tend to do. And whether we even use drugs and alcohol, we'll find other ways of distracting ourselves so that we don't have to feel. And feeling is what we came here to do. We have to feel. It is part of how we express ourselves. It is part of how we can live a fuller, freer expression of the spirit that we are. It is even how we communicate with each other and the world around us. Most of us have forgotten that we're vibrational beings. And what we feel in here is what we vibrate into the world around us. And as I've said many times, what we put out we receive. And if I'm putting out fear and anxiety, worry, what if something happens, projecting any sort of guilt or shame on someone else, I'm going to keep getting that in return through different circumstances and people I meet. The faces may change, the places may change, but it's going to be the same lesson over and over for me until I'm ready to learn it. And that's where God loves us so much. He'll keep playing the game until we're ready to play a different game. And I hope in this step you start to realize that it is time to start playing a different game. One of the analogies that I like making is imagine a chessboard. And do you want to be the pieces on the board, or do you want to be the hand moving the pieces on the board? Or yet, do you want to be the mind in which you're thinking about the movement of the pieces from the hand on the board? I'd rather be in the mind. I would rather be in the mind that allows me to pay attention to what I'm thinking. I would rather be in the universal mind that tells me if I'm thinking something and it's making me feel bad, then I ought not be thinking about that and I need to change my thinking. We get into pattern thinking, habitual thinking, and anything that forms a habit over time, we tend to repeat, whether it feels good or not. And that's what step 4 is all about, is changing this pattern thinking. And like I said, this will be the last time you can play the blame game. So how I was taught to do this was you get yourself a spiral notebook, and on one side at the top of a page you write down the person's name. Now, like I wrote down my mom, and then underneath that page, I wrote out the resentment that I had for her. I wrote down all the anger. I expressed how I felt, how I thought she did me wrong. I went through the gamut and I held nothing back. And I mean, I got angry. I cried. I screamed, I hated you. And why could you do this to me? And how? And I went through all of that. But I kept pushing through and writing it down. And I didn't pick up any drugs or alcohol in doing this process, no matter how bad I seemed to have gotten. And I felt like, excuse my French, but I felt like shit during this process. I really did. And I never thought that I would get through it. But if you are willing, and you keep praying, and you keep asking, and you keep pushing yourself, and not listening to that voice inside of your head that says, screw this, throw it away, this ain't going to do anything, it's not worth it, don't listen to that voice, because it is the lie. That is the part of you that wants to keep you small and insecure. It wants to keep you from expanding and getting rid of all of these demons that you've been holding on to for so many years. Because that's all what demons are. They're what we create in our own mind, and we allow them to continue to haunt and possess us. Okay? There's your possession. You gave it over. You're the one who allowed it. There's nothing outside of yourself that has possessed you. This is what you've created for you. And I know that can be a little hard to swallow, but it's the truth. And it can't hurt you. It can't hurt you anymore unless you allow it. And that's why it is so necessary to write these resentments down, to write them down with all that you can. And you're probably not going to be able to do it in one night. And I usually give my sponsorees 2 weeks. I will not let them sit in this longer than 2 weeks. They need to move through this, and they need to be thorough. And I got through it, and if I can get through it, anybody can get through it, because I had a lot of resentments in my past. And I enjoyed carrying a lot of them around because it would justify my actions and my behavior. And there's that part of me that when I started doing this, that came to the deep realization that I could no longer, from this day forward, after it was written down, justify my behavior on my past, because I was now facing it right there in front of me for the very, very first time in my entire life. And again, I'm not going to tell you it's easy, but you're worth it. You're worth releasing these demons. You're worth releasing yourself from this baggage I found in doing this process and doing this step, the back pain that I had had for so many years that sometimes would actually be debilitating. Try saying that 3 times fast. Slowly started fading. And today I no longer have any back problems. It's just from carrying all that baggage around and that weight for so many years. What we hang on to in our emotional, in our mental bodies tend to weigh us down in our physical bodies. That energy has to manifest somewhere, and it will manifest within the physical. It will also continue to manifest in your outer world and your circumstances until you have faced it and have released and let it go. And this is a process. This isn't going to happen overnight, but I do hope that you allow yourself to allow it to happen by doing the work that's asked of you. And I'm here, I'm living proof, and there's many others to let you know that there is light on the other side and that you can get to the other side. You know, it says, you know, so many times you got to go through hell before you get to heaven. And there is a heaven awaiting within you. There really is. And the hell is not as bad as you tend to make it. It's done. It's over. It can't hurt you anymore. So let's release it. Let's get it on paper. So at the top of the page again, write who. Write the name. Write out the resentment. And on the next uh, page, cut it in half. And on the next side after the resentment, I want you to write down what it affected. Did it affect your self-esteem? Did it affect your self-worth? Did it affect your sexual relationships? Did it affect your pocketbook, your money? Did it affect your physical? What did it affect? Write it all down. You know, you can't face something if you're not willing to see what it is. And we have to face where we have allowed ourselves to beat ourselves up, where we've allowed ourselves to become insecure. You know, what was the driving force behind that? You know, and a lot of times it's the resentments that we hold become the driving force behind why we're insecure or why we do drugs and alcohol or why we eat too much. There's always an emotional place that has been seated at some point in our past that we keep reliving, and that's where it affects us. You know, every one of us is different. Some of us, our self-esteem isn't too bad, but you know, we tend to be a little over cocky, or we tend to you know, not be good with money because it affected our pocketbook, or we tend to have, you know, a sexual lifestyle that, you know, may not be so healthy for you. And it all will boil back to something that you've picked up in your past. And usually it's in a resentment that you're holding. So write down how it affected. I recommend if you want further and a deeper understanding, pick up the Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book. You know, it's in there too. If there's any questions that you have, I encourage you to please, at the bottom, at the bottom of the YouTube page where it has comments, please put them in there. You know, and I will help the best I can. I will answer any and all who do write down their comments. And I encourage you to take this time to do this self-searching because you are worth it. You are worth it. And you're never going to really know what you really have to offer until you uncover who you really are. And when we hold on to resentments and fear and all this pain and hurt and keep rehashing it, well, that's who we think we are. But that's not the truth of us. And that's not what you came here to do and be. So give yourself this gift and ask your divine team to help you push through this when you feel afraid or when you feel like you just can't feel it anymore. Don't pick up any drugs or alcohol. Don't put food in your mouth. Turn to prayer. turn to that place in you that does say, it's okay. Turn to that quiet, still voice that I know you've heard, we all have, that keeps pulling for us, that's like our silent little cheerleading team. Start tuning into that voice, allowing that voice to get stronger and help motivate you. Allow yourself to feel and know that it's okay to feel. Next, there's another column on the other side of that after you write down what it affected. And this is where we write out what's our part in it. And I know there's a lot of things that has happened to you that you can't possibly fathom what you could possibly have a part in it. And I can only teach through example. And one of my examples, my father, when he was molesting me from the age of 4 to about 12 years old, what possibly could be my part in that experience. And what I came to realize is my part in it was, one, I didn't tell anybody. I did not tell anybody. And two, I allowed it to live rent free in my head all my life. That was the only part I played in it, but it's still my part. I allowed it to justify my actions. I allowed it to dictate how my sexual um, experiences were to play out. I allowed it to tell me what I thought I was only good for. I allowed it to teach me that sex is love. There's my part in it. That's my part in it. And then believing in the hype. That's my only part in that. But I had a part in it. And, when it came to my mother and the way our relationship played out and the fact that, she was only 16 when she had me. And I had this fantasy world up in my head due to culture and TV at the time, Leave It to Beaver, the Brady Bunch, all of that, white picket fences, that, family problems would be fixed within a half-hour time period. And I could never figure out why my mother didn't act like the mothers I would see on TV. Why didn't she want to hug me? Why didn't she want to protect me? Why didn't she want me? And as I worked through this process, I started to learn a lot about my mother that I'd never known before. And I had found out that she was just as scared as I had become. And that my expectations of what I thought she should do or should be like or should treat me was setting me up for that resentment. Because I expected her to behave differently than what she was able to give me. She didn't have an affectionate childhood. I didn't know that at the time, but as I learned it, it was up to me to ask the question, Michelle, how can you expect her to give you something that she never herself had to give, and she didn't know how? Wow, that was a big realization, that I expected so much out of these people when, in all truth, they're just as messed up as I am, or I was. Today I'm grateful that I have recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. I'm not cured from the dis-ease of drugs and alcoholism, but I am recovered from that hopeless state of mind and body. And it's possible for anyone who applies these steps rigorously and honestly. And this is where we get honest for a lot of us for the first time in our lives. So write out your part in it, Um, you're never going to get through it completely until you are honest. And with honesty comes humility. And that's a big step in the direction of recovery. So this is going to be an interesting week for you. And next week we will get together and work with step 5. Like again, if you have any questions or comments, please Facebook me or put the comments at the end of the YouTube page, and I will gladly help in any way I can. I'm here to serve. Allow me to serve you. Have a blessed week and know that you are loved and you are supported from a divine place within you, around you, and through you. Bye bye.